Every time you get paid, you celebrate for about 3 seconds. Then reality kicks in, because before your money even says hello, it's already said goodbye to a percentage of itself. Not stolen, of course. That would be illegal. No, this is taxation. Completely different, much more professional, necessary, responsible, patriotic. At least that's what you're told. But here's the question most people never slow down long enough to ask. Where did income tax actually come from? And was it ever meant to stay this way? Because if you trace it back far enough, you don't just find policy, you find war, you find emergency measures, you find legal workarounds, and you find a system that quietly and very politely never left. Segment 1, Before the Necessity. There was a time, believe it or not, when Americans earned money and kept most of it. Crazy concept. For the first chunk of US history, there was no federal income tax. The government funded itself through tariffs, taxing imports, excise taxes, specific goods like alcohol, land sales. In other words, the government made money without directly reaching into your paycheck. Why? Because early leaders had a concern. Call it old-fashioned paranoia if you want. They believed that if the government could tax personal income, it would need to know how much you make, where it comes from, and what you're doing with it. Which, oddly enough, starts sounding a lot like oversight. And oversight, historically speaking, has a funny way of expanding. So for a while, they avoided it. Not because they couldn't create an income tax, but because they understood what it could turn into. Segment 2, enter emergency powers. Then came a little thing called the American Civil War. And suddenly, the government needed money. Fast. War tends to do that. But don't worry, it was temporary, just a short-term solution. A quick fix. We'll remove this as soon as things calm down kind of deal. Sound familiar? At first, it was limited, applied mostly to higher earners. Modest rates, framed as necessary for survival, and after the war ended, they actually repealed it. Gone. Which is refreshing. And also slightly suspicious in hindsight, because once something like that gets introduced, it doesn't just disappear from the imagination. It lingers. Segment 3, Round 2, now with legal drama. Fast forward to 1894. Congress tries again. Another income tax, this time during peacetime, because apparently the idea was just too good to let go. But this time, people pushed back. The law was challenged and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in a major decision, the court ruled it unconstitutional. Why? Because it was considered a direct tax that wasn't properly distributed among the states. In other words, nice try, but no. For a moment, it looked like the idea had hit a wall. Segment 4, the workaround. Instead of fighting the ruling, they changed the rules. In 1913, the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified. This gave Congress the power to tax income without those previous restrictions. Barrier removed, problem solved, system unlocked. At first, it seemed reasonable. Only applied to high earners, low rates. Marketed as fair, the kind of thing that totally stays small and controlled forever. Except, historically speaking, it almost never does. War strikes again. Then came World War I, and just like before, emergency justified expansion. Rates went up, more people were included, collection systems improved, because once a system exists, crisis gives it permission to grow. And unlike the Civil War version, this time, it didn't go away when things settled down. It stayed, quietly, permanently. Segment 6, the masterstroke, withholding. Now here's where things get efficient. Before the 1940s, people paid taxes differently. You calculated what you owed and paid it, which had one major flaw. You could actually feel it. Then came World War II, and with it, a brilliant innovation, withholding. Instead of you paying taxes later, they just take it before you ever see it. Problem solved. No large painful payment, no dramatic moment of realization, just a quiet subtraction every paycheck, forever. And let's be honest, out of all the changes, this one might be the most genius. Because when you never fully experience the loss, you stop questioning it. Segment 7, expansion mode. From there, the system did what systems tend to do. It expanded. more brackets, more rules, more forms, more complexity. The Internal Revenue Service grew into a massive enforcement and collection system, and what started as a tax aimed at the wealthy gradually worked its way down to the middle class, then to almost everyone. Because once a system is in place, it rarely says that's enough. Segment 8, the complexity layer. Today, income tax isn't just a percentage, it's a maze. Deductions, credits, write-offs, penalties, exceptions. And here's the interesting part. Complex systems don't just collect money, they influence behavior. They reward certain actions. They discourage others. They quietly guide decisions. And when a financial system starts shaping behavior, it stops being just financial. It becomes structural. Segment 9, the pattern. Let's step back. Income tax began as a temporary wartime measure, successfully repealed once, declared unconstitutional at one point, reintroduced through constitutional change, expanded during crises, embedded through withholding. That's not random. That's a pattern, and patterns tend to repeat, especially when they work. Segment 10, the real question. This isn't about arguing whether taxes should exist. That's a different conversation. This is about understanding how something starts and what it becomes. Because once a system is accepted, it doesn't need to force compliance. It becomes normal, expected, routine. And once something becomes routine, it becomes permanent. Every system has a beginning. Most people live inside the system without ever looking back at how it was built. Income tax wasn't always permanent. It wasn't always this complex. It wasn't always this widespread, but step by step, it became exactly that. Not overnight, not all at once, just slowly enough that nobody really noticed the full picture. And maybe that's the most important part, because the most powerful systems don't arrive with force. They arrive with reason, with necessity, with good intentions, and they stay because they quietly become part of life. Unfiltered truth, unshakable faith. Stay aware, stay thinking, stay rock solid.